solution this year and help finally resolve this problem after so many years. So we're really thankful, and I want to really commend this board for really working with me to accomplish that this year. But for the San Benito County Court, our beautiful courthouse across the street, you all know that last year I also fought to include additional funding in the budget for additional court security. Because of the added features at this courthouse, it needed additional staff to keep the court safe and to protect families and folks who are utilizing access to justice at this courthouse. But this year is when it actually went into effect. The court applied for the funding. Actually, the Sheriff's Department applied for the funding, but they had only given the county $200,000. We were fighting to get at least $100,000 more. We invited the California Department of Finance, which is the governor's arm of the budget. Their staff came down, looked at the courthouse. We had the CAO of the county join us in a tour, the presiding judge, Sanders, the sheriff. We all did a tour, talked to these folks, and convinced them that this county deserved to have an additional position. The reason that's important is that now that it's locked in at $300,000 a year, that will remain true for every year after that. So just $100,000 over 10 years, that's $1 million more for court security. So we were very proud to accomplish that and convince the Department of Finance to give us that funding for our new courthouse. Also, as the chairman of the Latino Caucus, we're very proud to have some measures included in the budget that I think will really help hardworking families here in San Benito County. First of all, I championed an issue of having $15 million included in the budget to help lawful permanent residents. These are legal residents, green card holders that are eligible to become U.S. citizens. They just need the help to take the English classes, the civics test, interview preparation. There's 2.5 million in California. And so we were able to accomplish this record amount in the budget. If the president's DAPA or DACA programs for immigrants is able to succeed through the courts, then it would also be able to assist immigrants to qualify for those programs. We also included $40 million for health care for children. These are regardless of their immigration status, that they could have coverage through Medi-Cal. And we also championed $3.5 million for farm worker housing. As you know, rural areas are having a harder time, especially along the coast, providing housing for our agricultural workers, and we're able to accomplish a small amount, but we certainly need more in terms of farm worker housing. I want to give an update on my AB 60. These were bills that I passed in 2013, but they're being implemented this year and early next year. First of all, AB 60, which is a driver's license for undocumented immigrants, went into effect on January 2nd of this year, and only in about 8.5 months, already over 500,000, over 500,000 immigrants have already have a license in their hand. That means they took the rent test and passed, they took the driving test and passed, they have auto insurance, and now they're able to drive to work in the morning, take their kids to school, go out to church on a Sunday without fear that their cars will be impounded. So this has been a huge accomplishment so far, and all the concerns about racial profiling or discrimination against immigrants, because it had the additional language on the front of the license, there's been no case that has taken place in almost 9 months. But we're very proud to work with law enforcement to get their support to make this a reality in California. Lastly, the minimum wage, which was my bill AB 10 in 2013, raised the minimum wage on July 1st, 2014 from $8 to $9. It will go up again on January 1st, 2016 from $9 to $10, and that would be the highest statewide minimum wage in the country at that time. But certainly would help hardworking families. But one of the main things I think we're accomplished to help San Benito County is this bill that was just signed on September 22nd. This was a bill that was vetoed last year. I kept working with the governor for 3 years trying to bring back a form of redevelopment. AB 2 was signed. It's now called the Community Revitalization Investment Authority. But this would allow places like Hollister to establish what is called the CREA, or this Revitalization Investment Authority, to keep local tax increment. These are property taxes that are generated locally. Rather than sending everything to Sacramento, you're able to keep some of that locally to attract jobs, help local businesses expand, and 25% gets set aside for affordable housing. This was what was called redevelopment before, but back in 2011, the legislature eliminated it. I was only one of 3 Democrats not to do that, because I was asking my colleagues to reform it, not eliminate an important tool for cities and counties. But this bill now is targeted to the most disadvantaged communities, places with high unemployment, high crime, high poverty. It stays true to the true intent of redevelopment, which is to help those areas most in need. Last Friday, I was at the conference of the California League of Cities in San Jose. I was proud to win the Legislator of the Year award for enacting this law after a long battle and being able to convince the governor that this is the right thing to do for disadvantaged communities across California. But this will certainly help Hollister, Salinas, Watsonville, all the cities all the way down to King City. We had some other bills that were that I was a joint author of. Two are landmark bills. One was signed just yesterday afternoon. This is a controversial bill. This is called the Compassionate Choices or End of Life Act. End of Life Choices Act. It was ABX 215. This was a bill that was enacted originally in Oregon. Later, there's another. California is now, I think, the 6th state to enact this. Actually, 5th state. But this would allow terminally ill patients to have options at the end of life to decide how they want to end their life in the privacy of their home and also with dignity and compassion. This was a very personal one to me because my father, who's a Vietnam-era veteran and he was a pastor throughout his life of his church. He's currently battling terminal bone cancer. And like I always say, this is something that you don't really think about it till it's somebody that you love, somebody that you care about. But for those who are terminally ill and who have diseases that will result in their organs no longer functioning or resulting in agonizing pain, this is certainly something that is important to offer to Californians. This has the support of about almost 70% of California voters, but the governor was in agreement in giving these options to people with terminal illness and signed it yesterday into law. California becomes only the 2nd state to enact it through legislation behind Vermont. I was a joint author of that bill. The other bill I was a joint author of is AB 1461, which is the California New Voter Motor Act, which would automatically register citizens, and this is very clear, for citizens that have a license through the DMV. Oregon enacted this law, but rather than struggling every year, election after election, trying to register voters by the deadline, this would automatically register the majority of Californians who are U.S. citizens. Then it's our job to educate voters and get them out to vote on election day. So this one is yet to be signed by the governor, but certainly if it is signed, it will certainly be a landmark bill to address a real problem. Last year, in the June election, we had the lowest turnout of California voters since 1946. A few other bills on voting rights. This is AB 400, which would be able to utilize our electronic traffic signs to remind voters to get out and vote on election day. I worked closely with this bill on the governor, but also made sure that it doesn't interfere with amber alerts, emergencies, blue alerts, traffic alerts, and other safety alerts. But certainly an easy way to use technology, existing infrastructure, to remind voters to get out and vote on election day. This one is awaiting a signature. Also, I carried a bill to expand the California Voting Rights Act. These are for communities that moved to district elections, just like Hollister did several years ago. But if boundaries were not drawn up in a fair way, or they were drawn in a way to dilute the voting strength of minority groups, this would allow just the courts to review them, just to ensure that boundaries are drawn in a fair way. I worked with Secretary of State Alex Padilla. He was a sponsor of this bill, and this one's awaiting a signature. But as chairman of the Environmental Safety Committee, I also carried bills to hold polluters accountable. These are sometimes companies in our state that are harming our environment. They're contaminating our air. This would give the Department of Toxics additional tools to hold polluters accountable. It increased fines for certain types of situations, increased interest on fines that they were given. It was so low that some of these polluters had no incentive to pay their fines, and those funds usually go back to cleanup funds to clean up contaminated sites, and also power to obtain records to determine whether they could pay these fines. But I got this photo of Excite plant, because this was a battery recycling plant that was shut down just a few months ago in Vernon in Los Angeles. But this battery plant was emitting toxics into the air, and now they estimate, the Department of Toxics estimates that maybe up to 10,000 homes around this battery plant have high levels of lead in their soil. It's probably going to be one of the largest Superfund cleanup sites in California history. But this is an example of why certainly having laws that protect our citizens, their properties, really matter. And this is a huge one in Los Angeles and very recently. Also, AB 215 was signed by the governor. This was a bill in the education area. I looked, there was highly publicized cases, one out of Monterey. That's why I have Monterey Peninsula Unified. But there was other superintendents throughout the state that when they left school districts, they were giving these huge payouts. Some were like almost half a million dollars in severance pay alone, not to mention other benefits or the retirements. So when school districts were giving these payouts in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, that meant less money for our kids in the schools. When I looked at the California Education Code, they were eligible to get up to 18 months severance pay. So an example, if you had a superintendent that was being paid $300,000 a year, when they left, they could leave with a severance of up to $450,000. And because the code allowed 18 months, it became the standard in contracts. And if they were involved in illegal or fraudulent or malfeasance, the code will allow them to get paid up to 6 months severance pay. So, and a $300,000 salary, that would be $150,000 pay, even when they were committing fraud. So I work with the ACSA, which is the Association of California School Administrators, trying to find a compromise, trying to address this problem. So we found a compromise that instead of paying out 18 months, it was capped at 12. And in those cases of 6 months, even in cases of fraud or malfeasance, we eliminate that completely. They will not be able to qualify for any severance. This was a subject of a KSBW editorial a couple weeks ago, applauding the signature on this bill by Governor Brown. But certainly I think we will help keep more money where it belongs in the classroom. Also, this was another bill that was signed that helps. It's on the vision care area, but I think it would help ensure access to vision care for everyday hardworking Californians. This was a 20-year dispute that was fought in the courts. It was subject to enforcement by the Attorney General's office Kamala Harris. But it was a big dispute between optometrists and these vision care centers that you see at JCPenney's, Costco, Lens Crafters, Walmart. And we were able to get all the stakeholders together, the governor's office. We had 10 meetings in negotiations over 2 hours each. But it was making sure that we could ensure that these optical centers continue to provide quality care to Californians at an affordable price. Many times they have hours that are in the evening, on the weekends, that are much more accessible to hardworking Californians. But we were able to resolve this dispute after 20 years. And for me, this was just an example that when we go to Sacramento, to not shy away from hard problems, the very charged emotions on both sides, but it's to try to find resolution to these problems. And this was one of those. And this was signed, I believe, just last week. In the court area, we also expanded expedited jury trials. As you know, the courts are backlogged. There's so many cases that are taking forever just to get a hearing. So we expanded what was originally a pilot program to include expedited jury trials, which will, in the end, save the courts millions of dollars, speed up trials in cases that are in the amount of $25,000 or less. So we were proud to work on that bill. We all know that there's a growing there's a growth in jobs in the energy industry, but as we expand jobs in renewable energy, other types of renewable energy, wind and geothermal, we also want to make sure that certain communities are not being left behind. So this is a bill that would require an outreach plan to minority businesses. This includes women, minorities, disabled veterans, LGBT-owned businesses, so that everybody gets a fair process at getting a contract with the Energy Commission. This was modeled after the California Public Utilities Commission, which was very successful in giving more contracts in a fair way to a wider, diverse group of businesses. This would do the same now with the California Energy Commission that gives out millions of dollars in contracts each year. One more, then I'll go back. My last bill I want to mention was one that was very important to groundwater. As we all know, many areas of California are facing serious conditions regarding the drought. In places like East Porterville, wells have gone dry. Over 900 wells, and every week, a dozen wells go dry. That means families don't have running water through their homes. In other areas, parts of the Central Valley, the ground is subsiding because of overdrafting the groundwater, creating real environmental problems. So last year, the governor signed 3 Groundwater Management Act bills that now every area, every water basin has to have a sustainable plan for maintaining their water supply, groundwater supply. But with that, in some of these areas, they end up having legal issues fought out in court. Those take millions of dollars in court attorney's fees. They last years with no resolution in the courts. So we worked with the California Farm Bureau, environmental groups, the governor's office, numerous other stakeholders, including ACWA, which is the Association of Water Districts, to expedite and find a faster and more efficient process dealing with groundwater adjudication in our courts. This bill, we had 15 meetings, over 2 hours each in the governor's office, but we were able to find a compromise among all the stakeholders and the governor's office. So we were proud to work with the Farm Bureau in accomplishing this major and very important goal on a complex area of law. But just to mention, my last slide is we had some work that is unfinished. We didn't accomplish it. One of those has to do with I was appointed as a member of the Extraordinary Commission or Committee on Transportation. This was the Extraordinary Committee that was called by the governor to address funding for transportation. And as we all know, we have needs here locally, whether it's Highway 25 or Highway 156. But then when locals look to how can we do highway improvements on Highway 125, there hasn't been state money for future projects. So this is where we're going to come back probably in January to try to have a package of bills, including revenue-generating bills, to be able to invest in our highway and road infrastructure. And I say roads as well because it includes local and county roads. As we all know, there's a backlog. I think there's over $59 billion in backlog in maintenance in our roads and highways. So I look forward to continue to work on this, but just so the residents know, I filed the first bill in that extraordinary session on transportation, which was ABX 2-1, which has to do with truck weight fees. These were fees that you see the big semi-trucks, they pay a weight fee. That accrues about $1 billion every year. During the recession, it was put to the general fund, but now we're saying we should be able to put that back where it truly belonged and it was intended, which is in our roads and highway maintenance. Also, an early payback of loans in transportation would bring back another $500 million. That would be a $1.5 billion package alone. So that's my bill that I filed, and I've been working on that all of this year. But 2 other bills that did not get signed, they moved almost with bipartisan, unanimous support, but unfortunately were held up in the Senate appropriations, which is almost the second to last step before it goes to the Senate floor. One of those was an asset forfeiture bill, AB 443. This is a bill that was sponsored by Attorney General Kamala Harris, strongly supported by law enforcement, but had to do with asset forfeiture against transnational criminal gangs. These are the folks that across international borders are the people that are giving out orders. You saw the 29th homicide in Salinas, but these are the people that are really creating havoc, giving out orders for murders, making our neighborhoods more violent because of their drug trade. But this was a tool that if we really want to hurt these transnational gangs, it's going after what they value most, which is their assets, whether it's money laundering, their money, the other assets that they may have. That's how we're really going to be able to address these very sophisticated criminal organizations. So I look forward to bringing this one back next year. But certainly when we have communities that are being devastated by gang violence, for me this is a very important tool to accomplish and give law enforcement an important tool. Lastly was my AB 20, which was a concept to give work permits to agricultural workers. It would require a delegation of authority by our federal agencies, including the U.S. Department of Justice and Department of Homeland Security. But it would create a pilot program, the first in the country, to give work permits to agricultural workers to work lawfully in our state, pay their taxes, and continue to contribute to California's economy. This got off the floor on the Assembly with a 69-2 vote, bipartisan. It was unanimous in the Assembly Agriculture Committee, Senate Labor Committee, but yet it got held up in Senate Appropriations. We look forward to bringing this one back because this would certainly help many of our agricultural workers throughout the state. With that said, I'm just here to answer any more questions, but this was some of the highlights. I thank you for allowing me to share with the residents of San Benito County some of the accomplishments for 2015 up in Sacramento. I look forward to working hard again next year.
Okay, I'll see if the supervisors have any questions. Supervisor Patella?
Yeah, first, I really want express my gratitude to your work on our ERAF and getting that resolved. People don't realize how long that's been hanging out there. 15 years, maybe longer, and it finally took your efforts and Senator Canella's efforts and a little bit of help to get that done, and I really appreciate it, and thank you very much. As you noted, your district is 500,000 people, and Samuel County 60, so anything like that makes a big, huge difference for us, and along with some of the other accomplishments. You have worked very hard for Samuel County, and thank you very much for that. I was also pleased, the question I had, and this is a state and federal issue, is in your district being, primarily agriculture. We have a crisis. It's a crisis besides water. The labor situation, I'm sure you've had tons of phone calls to your office to try to get some help. And that's my background is agriculture. It doesn't do us any good to grow the crops, invest a lot of money, and we can't get it out of the field. And I think this is an industry-wide problem. Housing is very important, and we got to continue to make that possible, both from the private sector and the public sector effort. But it doesn't do us any good to bring in housing if we don't have bodies to put in that housing. And AB 20, I hope other members of the Assembly, members of the Senate realize that the private sector, the agriculture, is in dire need of more bodies in the field. And I hope you continue that effort and really emphasize that going in next year.
Right. That AB 20 was strongly supported by numerous agriculture associations because that's where the greatest need is. They estimate anywhere from 50 to 75% of agricultural workers are undocumented. So if we incentivize by providing a legal way that they could work lawfully in the state, it was a concept that was worth pursuing. And it was frustrating that sometimes my colleagues in the Senate, they kill a very good idea. They had a lot of promise. It wouldn't change their legal status because only Congress could do that, but it would give a temporary status as people who participate in this program having relief from deportation and have a work permit to work lawfully in our state. I think everyone could understand they want to do a job that many don't want to do, but they would pay their taxes, continue to provide for their families, and make an honest living. I think that's something would be a good accomplishment, and certainly California would have been the state to lead this type of a pilot program.
Supervisor Lanza?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Assemblyman, I just want to thank you also, concur with Supervisor Patello. Thank you for your efforts with the ERAF bill and the relief that gave us. Also, I just want to thank you for your efforts in trying to get the transportation dollars moved to where it belongs. Get it back out of general fund, back into transportation. Our roads are suffering from lack of resources. So anything we can do to assist you on that, just let us know. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We'll do that.
Supervisor Rivas?
Yeah, there's not much more that I can add, but thank you. Obviously when you're dealing in the state legislature at the state level, there's thousands and thousands of problems, and you helped us with the ERAF, which means everything to us, so thank you for that.
Thank you, Luis.
Supervisor
We really do appreciate it.
Luis, I want to thank you for taking the time to come out to San Benito County. It means a lot to us for you to be here, and you've been here ever since you've been on the Assembly. We appreciate that. Congratulations on Legislator of the Year. That's a huge thing. I know you work hard. I've seen you in action, and it's exemplary what you do on our behalf, and you always champion what we ask you that our needs are. You go for it and give us the time and give us that effort. So thank you on behalf of the supervisors and on behalf of San Benito County community.
I appreciate that very much, and look forward to working on whatever priorities San Benito County has next year, and helping solve, again, local and state problems. The last remaining update was just on the Pinoche Valley Solar. As you have worked very hard on that. It has overwhelming, I think, support of the citizens of San Benito County. We would bring the first solar project to San Benito County. This past week, we were very proud to obtain the permits from the federal agencies, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and U.S. Fish and Wildlife. The only remaining permit is with the California Fish and Wildlife, and that's the one we've been struggling the most. Numerous calls to the governor's office, to Secretary Laird, to the staff at Fish and Wildlife, trying to obtain these permits. We're that close, but still it's being held up very recently. So we're trying to, hopefully, these next few days, be able to get some help from the governor to push that particular state agency to give this permit that is permits for this project that have already prevailed in court. They've already met all the environmental reviews. All we need is a remaining permit from this one state agency to have this project realized in San Benito County and benefit this county where it's very much needed for jobs and revenue for the county. So I look forward, hopefully, to report back some good news, hopefully, in the next few days on this remaining project. Thank you very much, Supervisor.
Okay, and thank you. All right. Okay, we'll move on to public comment. Do you have, Clerk of the Board, some speaker cards?
Marty Richmond?
And these are items that are not on the agenda that you can present to the board?
Good morning. Marty Richmond from Hollister. Before I move to my main subject, I just want to point out that we had a discussion during one of your sessions about replacing our minutes with some technology. Well, the technology is not working. For 2 weeks, the CMAP feed is not working. All you're basically getting is still photos. So you're posing very nicely. You all look very good in still photos. There's no audio, so we can't hear you. So I have no idea whether CMAP is actually getting a good feed from here, whether or not they're actually recording what's going on. But I can tell you the public's not getting it, and that is not restricted to just the Board of Supervisors. The same problem's happening over in the City Council. So my guess is it's a CMAP problem, and that's one of the problems with technologies. Is when it goes, it's gone. There's no backup. So now on to my main subject. One of the reasons I was a big supporter of the arrangement for a fire contract between the county and the city of Hollister was the analysis. I think I worked hard to ask people to get a good analysis of the issues of response times. And one of the problems we had clearly from the thing was the long response times, especially in North County. South County, we know is going to be a long response time, because it's hours away. But I was surprised about the bad response times that we had on record for North County. And the first 45 minutes could save your life. For 15 minutes and you don't get there, it's a big problem. And if you have a fire, we've all seen how fast those go, especially in the dry season. So I am concerned that we're still seem to be dancing around a little bit about the location of the new fire station. I understand that in your minds you may have made a decision, but I don't know if you firmed it up in a vote. My understanding is we have not firmed it up in a vote. Now, I stand to be corrected if I'm wrong. But look, how long can we wait on this new fire station? I understand you've got a good spot. I haven't chimed in. I've had no opinion on where to put it, but I think you got a good spot now, and I think it's time to get down to brass tacks and to tell the people at the fire department this is where it's going to be for sure, so that we can go ahead and start doing the infrastructure that's required to get the benefit that we wanted to get all along. Anything that adds to the response time is going to be a problem because it's already far out. We need to take that step, and I hope you will do it in the near future. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Marty. Any other speaker cards?
Yes, Madam Chair. Mr. Robert Crump.
Okay, now I know that face. I kept looking over there and I thought I know this gentleman. The name says it all.
Good morning. I know Margie from school board. I was on the Hollister School Board for 13 years. Were you on when I got on?
Oh, yes.
So you were 13 year too.
I was 20-something years.
Unbelievable.
Left, I stayed.
She's a glutton for punishment. And I wouldn't run for this office just because you have to wear a tie. It's terrible. Anyhow, what I'm here for is this was extemporaneous, and it was filled from the beginning to end. That's a lie. I just have a very short presentation. The last time I was in this room, I believe, was to beg for a lot to build a house on. This used to be the land use room, and you guys were up in the second floor of the building next door, right? Superintendent? Yeah, well, I'm old. I remember things. Anyhow, well, you've got the same problem that we've got. I've been with the library as a fill-in person for about a year now, and I found out a few things about the library, and the biggest thing is they've run out of room. Now, I went to school here in town. I was born in this town on San Benito Street, as a matter of fact. That used to be Hazel Hawkins Hospital. And the only time I used the library in those days was to get out of the house.
Robbie, you need to address us. Look at us.
What?
You need to address the board.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm talking to everybody. I'm sorry.
I know, but address us.
I'm
Thank you.
sorry.
That's okay.
I'm not used to being on this side.
I figured a lot of people are not, so thank you.
Okay, I'm on yellow light.
Right.
What we need is more room. It seems to me like we've got a lot of vacant buildings in this city now. Right next door to us, for instance. The county school district has got a big chunk of the building that we're in now. We need more room, badly. And that's what I'm here begging for, or threatening, or whatever whatever adjective you want to use. But I would love to see you guys put your heads together and find us. If we just took where the county school district is now and move them next door and let us have the rest of that building for a library like it was intended to begin with, that would help. Think about it. I'll be back, and I hope you guys can come up with some suggestions.
Thank you, Robbie.
Thank
we
you.
appreciate your comments, and thank you for coming out here.
You
We
bet.
haven't seen you for a long time. Okay, any other speaker cards?
Pat Lowe.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Pat Lowe, and I'm chair of the San Benito County Homeless Coalition. The San Benito County Homeless Coalition would like to inform the board and the public that this 2015-2016 year will be the last year the coalition will be operating the emergency winter shelter. This decision was made by a majority of the Homeless Coalition Board of Directors and was made with excuse me, much discussion and contemplation on how best to serve the homeless in our community. The decision was not made lightly, nor was it not made with some sadness. It has been our great privilege to serve the homeless of our community for over the past 10 years. We have made many friends and have been on the receiving end of so much generosity from the community in its support of our program. Unfortunately, funding for our program is disappearing. County staff on numerous occasions has stated that they have identified funding sources to operate the new daycare center. And now, coupled with the board's decision to run a year-round 24/7 shelter, we have no other option, as we do not have the capacity to run this type of shelter. However, any sadness we feel over the transitioning out of the winter shelter work is tempered by the knowledge that our clients will be receiving care that we cannot offer and cannot provide. The clients will be in much better hands with the county immediately taking over the oversight and responsibility. The county's anticipated homeless service contract provider will have resources that we have never had. Hopefully, the emergency zoning for the county can build a new daycare center very quickly. We will be participating in the 12 Days of Giving program sponsored by the Community Foundation and local businesses this November and ask you to remember us at that time. Your donations will help us raise enough funds to finish this coming year. We wish to thank the board and more particularly the community for all of its support over the last 10 years. We believe that those in the community inclined to serve our homeless population will continue and will find new and better ways to do so in the future, because we all know we're a community that cares. Thank you.
Thank you, Pam.
And Lindsay?
I'm here to discuss the location of the homeless shelter. I apologize that I was not able to be here last Thursday night. I wasn't aware of the meeting until approximately 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I had a very important family situation to deal with on Thursday evening, so I wasn't able to attend. As you may be aware, the City of Hollister is going to be attending the NBAA, which is the National Business Aircraft Association convention in Las Vegas. And it is the largest gathering of business aircraft owners in the world. And it's a great place to showcase our community, our airport, and what I was planning on doing was showcasing the business park because we have through the fence access. This morning I wrote a letter to the City of Hollister, which I'd like to read portions of it to you now. This is to Bill Rivera, the city manager. Dear Bill, I want to let you know after the recent decision by the Board of Supervisors to make the county site at the Air Park Business Center in Flynn Road the #1 choice for the homeless shelter, I will be withdrawing my Air Park Business Center from participating in the NBAA marketing effort in Las Vegas. Since I must disclose the proposed location of the homeless shelter to any prospective companies, I feel I have nothing to promote. In order to offer my airport accessible lots via taxiways, I'm in the process of preparing plans and going to bid on construction of taxiways that would require an estimated additional investment of $1.5 million on my part. I feel that the proximity of the homeless shelter will make my marketing efforts useless. I have been in business for a very long time and have built millions of square feet in the Silicon Valley and 4 major business parks in Hollister and San Bernardino County. In my opinion, I will not only have trouble keeping existing companies, but I will have a very difficult time recruiting new companies to the area. The decision by the board is very untimely, and it's devastating not only to my marketing efforts, but to those of the city, the EDC, the county itself, and the Business Council, and others who are working to attract and retain job-producing companies to the area. In addition, it's very untimely because I'm working with 2 very large companies, one to retain them and keep the jobs here, and the other one is a very large manufacturer that I've been working on for about 2 years that actually brought their team out to look at the area on Wednesday, the day before the decision was made. We are just starting to recover from the shutdown of new growth as a result of the sewer moratorium and then the Great Recession. Without the vision and support of our county and city leaders, our efforts are useless. It takes a tremendous amount of effort and money and consistency to bring commerce to our area, and we all have to be working together as a cohesive team to be successful. To have an obstacle like a homeless shelter in the middle of the business district makes it impossible to retain and attract quality companies. And I would like to also say that I would like to be part of the solution. I think this is a huge problem. Every community deals with it. I think that the community, including myself, the Business Council, everyone needs to get involved and help you come up with a solution to this. putting it in the middle of the business part, I think is going to be devastating to our efforts.
Thank you, Ken. We appreciate your comments. And did you have a comment, Supervisor Vitello, at this time?
Well, I've been at a couple of different meetings, and I think we have an obligation to work in any area that is going to have the homeless shelter, and see what we could do to mitigate it and try to locate it in the best area we can. So I think we have a lot of work yet to do.
Any other speaker cards? Anyone else from the public that would like to address the board on items that are not on the agenda, you may do so at this time. There being none, I'll go ahead and bring it back to the department head announcement. CAO Espinosa?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, there is an announcement with regards to Fire Station 3. Today, Joe Hordell is actually meeting with the fire chief and architect on the building programming to see if there's feasibility at our Rosa Morada Fairview site. We'll be bringing that back to the fire committee tomorrow. We'll be discussing Fire Station 3. It's a change of date for the fire committee. At that point, we'll have to go through the normal process, CEQA process. So we'll have to actually go to your board and request a preferred site similar to what we did with the homeless shelter last week. At that point, once we get approval by the board and the intergovernmental, then we'll start the process if that's the wishes of the board. I would also like to remove or pull item number 17 from our regular agenda without any comment. We'll have to come back to your board at a later date for that particular item.
Okay,
Okay.
very good. And that's consent, oh no,
That was
is,
regular
agenda
item
number
out of our
17.
Council of Governments. That's correct. And I believe that's all the announcements that we have.
Okay, very good. Thank you. We'll move on to board announcements. Supervisor De La Cruz?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I just one quick one. Just want to thank the public and for those members of the community that attended my booth and visited my booth at this weekend's county fair. It was very educational, enlightening, a lot of discussion on some real hot issues, and I actually thank Supervisor Munzer for dropping by and getting a piece of my chocolate that I was giving out to the public. But overall, it was worth the visit. It was actually very. This is what San Benito County is about, communities and families. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, you're welcome. Supervisor Vitello?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I only have one thing I want to report, and this is really an issue for the entire board, and so that's why I want to work on this with everybody here. I received an email from Mr. Kemp, Clay Kemp, and he's with the Santa Cruz AAA Council for Senior Citizens, and we fund that through our community contributions program every year. And I don't know why was the only supervisor that got this email, but Clay asked for a meeting for the potential loss of $80,000 to senior services in our county, and asked me to give him a call, which I did, Madam Chair. And what he's requested, well, I'll read this email in portion here anyhow. I'm hoping the two of us can meet sometime this month discussing an emerging problem and a potential threat to services for seniors in San Benito County. The short version of the story that we should discuss is the Senior Council. In its role as an area agency of aging of Santa Cruz and San Benito counties, it provides $1.6 million in funding to organizations providing senior citizens in a two-county area. 25% of those funds are targeted for San Benito County. For your information, only 15% of the seniors in the two-county area live in San Benito County. 85% of them live in Santa Cruz County. Last year, the city of Hollister defunded all community-based programs. Communication about this action or process that led to it was not shared until after the year ended, despite efforts to find out what was happening. The reaction by my board, and especially by the AAA Advisory Council, is to consider decreasing AAA funding to the area to 20% instead of 25%. This would be a cut of about $80,000 a year. Action on this item is scheduled for October 15th by our Board of Directors, with a review by the AAA Advisory Council on the 14th. Both meetings will be held at 10 a.m. at the Wattsville Community Council. And so I did give Clay a call, and certainly we want to work together to make sure we don't lose this funding. I think it's important that members of this board attend those two meetings, as well as communicate to respective council members and possibly the mayor to attend that meeting and try to develop an understanding how important it is to provide those matching funds that is required to leverage this money. The seniors are a valuable segment of our community, but at times vulnerable. And so anytime we risk losing funding to programs is not a good situation to be in. Clay feels that if we attend these meetings and communicate, we should be able to secure our funding going forward. But if we're not there and have an unwillingness to do our part, we have a big issue.
Okay. What I would recommend, Supervisor Botello, at this time is that I don't know if we have representatives that have been appointed. I don't believe that we do for the senior council, but maybe we could look into it a little bit further. And if you could send us all that email, Supervisor Botello. If I got it, I apologize. I don't recall getting it. But certainly if what he's asking is for us to be there to support, including the city of Hollister, and if you could follow up on the same information to the city, hopefully we will be there to support their efforts. $80,000 is a lot of money for a program such as theirs. So we'll do our part to try to support them in any way that we can.
Yeah, and Madam Chair, if I may add, I don't think there's anything, malicious about the defunding, maybe a lack of understanding what it was actually paying, for and the importance of some of these programs, and it just maybe with the slip through the cracks at Hollister, but we need to make an effort to, make sure we get on the same page.
Okay, so we'll follow up on that and all of us get that same information. Thank you, Supervisor Botello. Supervisor Rivas?
The only announcement I have, Madam Chair, is to encourage the community to go out and support local high school team. As many of you may not know, next week is homecoming week. There will be a parade next Friday in the downtown area, and that will be followed up with a homecoming game in the evening time. So I just encourage the community to go out and support the local high school team. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much for that. Supervisor Munzer?
None this week.
Okay. My announcements will be, I have a presentation from our RCRC annual meeting, which I will incorporate at that time also the Board of Directors meeting. So I'll be doing that on a later agenda item. So we'll move on to consent agenda items 1 through 13. Are there any supervisors that would like to pull any of these items?
I'll pull 9 and 10.
9 and 10. Any others? Anyone from the public that would like to pull any of the consent agenda items 1 through 13? 9 and 10 have been pulled. No? Okay, I'll entertain a motion then to approve items
I'll move approval of the remainder of the consent agenda, Madam Chair.
Okay, there's a motion to approve all but 9 and 10.
Second.
There's a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Supervisor Botello, item number 9.
Thank you. I'll wait for Kevin to come up here.
Good morning.
Good morning, Kevin. The only question I had on this was, this is a grant, I guess, from the Homeland Security to, for radio communications, which is good. And we're purchase radios out of that grant. Now, is this it's a be distributed to, the fire, police, and sheriff's office? How is this inventoried? The radios get inventoried, say the portion, similar to the conversations we've had at the fire committee, is how we inventory equipment. This equipment will be assigned, say, to the Hollister Police Department, and that will fall into their inventory and so forth?
So, with this grant, pretty much everything that is purchased under it falls under OES's, so my department's inventory. So regardless of who has it, we have to tag it for the grant purposes, for auditing purposes. So technically, even though it's being used by Hollister Police Department, San Bernardino County Sheriff, it's owned, quote unquote, by OES because it's technically owned by the state because it's state money funneled from federal.
Oh, okay. And then, as that equipment is damaged or needs of repair or replacement, is that fall back onto OES as well?
No. When we hand over property from the grant, the departments who receive it have to sign a form saying basically they're responsible for any lost, damage, stolen, anything that happens to the equipment until we deem years down the road that it's obsolete and we replace it and whatnot. So it is the responsibility of the department that's using it.
Okay. All right. I just wanted to have that understanding and have an idea, because it's very similar to what we're trying to accomplish with the, the consolidated fire contract.
Right.
So, and that's the same premise that staff's working on with peers and the other departments.
Right. Kind of getting us on the same page with communication in the field.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. All right, do you
Ma-
want to,
Madam
let's
Chair-
go ahead and have the public, any input on item number 9? Okay, I'll bring it back for a vote. I'm sorry, CAO Espinosa.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I just wanted to clarify as well. This is the Gang of Five Fund, so there's a committee that's made up of the city, the fire chief, city police chief, the sheriff's office, health officer. So they decide, there's a funnel of money that comes from the state. They decide how best to use that in a joint effort. So if there's, like, we had a narrow banding project that impacted all of safety, so they put money towards that. Or to a generator that impacts the backup of all safety, 911 center. We used to have that before in the past. So those types of things, they would allocate those funds for. It was a joint effort. So just wanted to relay that to the board.
Supervisor Munzer, you have
Actually, I do have a question on this. Kevin, why did you break this out as two different items?
So it kind of might look kind of fishy, but it's not. So part of it's coming from fiscal year 14. Well,
Yeah.
it's
Okay.
it's
All right.
essentially one project, but part of it's coming from fiscal year 14 grant. We have 2 years to spend it, and then the remainder of it's coming from fiscal year 15.
I was sure you had a reason, but it was like...
Yeah. No, so it's just for, in case we get audited, I have proof. If I get audited for 14, then I have that documentation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No problem.
For that explanation. Any other questions? Okay, I'll bring it back for a vote. Dan, for item number 9 only.
For number 9, well, then I'll...
Do you have any questions on
no,
number 10?
it was handled both together.
Then-
But I'll make a motion to approve item 9.
I'll second that.
Okay, but before we vote, I didn't give the audience an opportunity for item number 10. Anybody want to address item number 10? Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, we'll move on now to the public hearing, and what I'd like to inform the board of is that what we're going to try to do is go through all of the agenda items through item number 16, and that'll leave only item number 18. But during break, meet and discuss and do closed session, which is going to be very short. So if that works and the timing works out well, we will break for closed session and come back, report out, and then continue the meeting. So with item number, I believe it's 18.
18.
Okay, so that's the plan. Okay, I will now open the public hearing.
Madam Chair, if I may, I'm going to abstain from item 14 as, you know, I have interest on two of the roadways mentioned on the resolutions and along 156. So I'm going to abstain and withdraw from.
Okay, so you will be in the other room and
Yeah.
recuse yourself.
Recusing myself.
Okay. Supervisor Bertello, for the record, is recusing himself on item number 14. And I had said that I was opening the public hearing, but before I do that, I will ask, first of all, the CAO to introduce it, and then I'll also invite the RMA to come up, the
Thank you,
director.
Madam. Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, this is items number 14 on our agenda. This is to hold a public hearing to adopt a resolution approving the new controlled access highway agreement for the new Highway 156 widening project between San Juan Bautista and Hollister. We have Brent Barnes here, our RMA director, to discuss this item. Brent?
Okay, thank you, Brent.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. I don't have a formal presentation on this. However, I'm happy to answer questions. In my experience, extensive experience in New Jersey, I dealt a lot with access management issues, obviously not Caltrans, but New Jersey DOT and local jurisdictions there. This is a very similar sort of project and a very standard sort of agreement. It's a baby step, if you will, in moving the Highway 156 project forward.
Okay.
With that, I'm happy to answer any
Are
questions.
there any questions before I open it up? Okay, thank you, Brent. I will now then open the public hearing and ask the public to come up. Do we have any speaker cards regarding this item? Okay. Anybody from the public that would like to address the board on item number 14? Okay, there being none, I will close the public hearing, bring it back to the board. The only comment that I would like to make is that I know this is a baby step, but there's always the concern of the culverts because there's a lot of flooding in that area. Just to, you know, for the record, to keep that in mind, and as we move forward with the realignment, with the changes, with the build-out, that the culverts are repaired or installed to prevent, you know, to address the drainage issue that we are all very well aware of on Highway 156. Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions? Okay.
You know, I guess this is the first baby step, the 156. Let's start it. Let's go at it. I make a motion that one, we hold a public hearing. 2, adopt resolution 2015 dash.
I believe it's 77.
77, thank you. Approving the new controlled access highway agreement, and 3, authorize the chair to sign resolution 2015-70, would be 77 or 78? 77?
77.
77, and the control access highway agreement.
Okay, there's a motion.
Second.
And a second. Any further discussion? Just a comment for me that when I looked at the date, going back and when this was first on the, I was playing in puddles, and that was really, you know, in the backyard. That was a long time ago.
I was trying to find out who the supervisors were at the time, Madam Chair.
I didn't recognize any names. Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, we'll continue on with our regular agenda. Oh, I'm sorry, we're going to bring back Supervisor Patello first. Okay, the next item is a Board of Supervisors item where I attended, along with our CAO, and by the way, there has been a name change to our, it's not Regional Council of Rural Counties. It was changed, and I wasn't even aware of it, but when I noticed reading through the material, it is now called Rural Counties Representatives of California. It's still RCRC, but it has a different
Thank
You
you,
know,
Madam
it-
Chair, because I was confused, because I thought it was regional, and then I started seeing documentation saying rural, so it was regional at one time.
It was regional,
Okay,
absolutely.
okay.
And now it's Rural County Representatives of California. So anyway, I attended the annual meeting. A lot of great information, but also a lot of discouraging information that I thought I would share with you at this time, and I'll try to just go through some of the points of the meeting itself. And these were presented by different folks, either state folks, economists, people that were, in transportation, some of our legislators, former and current, the FBI. I mean, there was just a whole array of representatives there that were presenting. So what is the future of our Golden State? Well, it's known that there are more people or young people graduating than there are jobs for them to go to. There's no longer manufacturing and construction as it was in the past. Even though you see a lot of construction down statewide, it is down. No tangible products are being made in California anymore to the extent that we are a huge manufacturing, state. What we have now is Twitter, Google, etc., a different type of industry. We've priced ourselves out, as we all know, and sending a lot of people out of the state to Texas, to Utah, to Nevada. And why is that? Because we are no longer affordable. The affordability in California is almost non-existent for people that want to buy here and start businesses here. The emission concern, they're saying, should not be focused in the state of California. We are doing everything right. We're doing everything we can. We are reducing emissions, but what is happening, other countries have no control. So therefore, they are going to be part of a huge problem if we don't focus on that issue. The water in California, this is a good thing, we're exceeding the statewide conservation targets. So congratulations to all of us for doing the right thing and conserving as we have been asked to do so. What we do need, though, is we need long-term policies that address statewide and local issues, and that would be local and statewide conservation, more of it. Storage, obviously, we need more storage, and we need to manage our groundwater a little bit better than we're doing now statewide. We need to invest in the watersheds, and that is the forest, and how we address clearing them out and making sure that the watersheds are protected. We need to stimulate private industry to invest in water management, like systems to capture the water. And that includes, of course, as I mentioned earlier, water storage and recycling. And also it was recommended that if anybody's proposing sales tax or any kind of tax initiative, that water is included in the plan of what is going to be done with those tax dollars. As far as social media, what came out of the annual meeting, it's that it's great, but it also has its downsides. It's great for events. It's great for reaching out to constituents, family, civic engagements, finding runaways, and much, much more than that. The downside of it is that it's bad for unsupervised children. Parents are not necessarily paying attention to what they're watching and who they are connecting with. Some of the examples that were given by the FBI agent were actually frightening even for adults. A very simple picture that may be taken by a parent of a child, and they gave the example that just received a driver's license. Send it out, by Facebook or whatever. All of a sudden, everybody knew who that child was, how old she was, when her birthday was, pretty much where she lived and where she goes to school. Very, very scary. You don't want that kind of information out to the public. The other area of concern is human trafficking. There's much of it going on in rural counties. This is where it's easy for people to hide. And believe it or not, 72% of those of human trafficking are United States citizens. As a community, what are we being asked to do? We are being asked to pay attention, to really concentrate and look at what are the red flags particularly that affect children, such as truancy, their behavior. Are they withdrawn? Are they hungry? Are there signs of bruising? These children are the most vulnerable, and as a community, we have to protect them, take care of them. We must prevent, as a community, find ways to either through ordinances or just, like I said, paying attention. We need to protect them. We need to partner as agencies, we need to be able to also, through our law, through our judicial system, to prosecute those that are involved in this, what they're calling an epidemic. There is available training for this kind of issue for employees, for hotel personnel, to recognize signs of potential human trafficking that go through their business establishments and in our communities. And human trafficking comes in many forms. There's involuntary servitude, smuggling and extortion, forced labor, and of course there's always the sex trafficking. So it is a major issue. The other item was vaccines and vaping, which are e-cigarettes. They're both a threat to public safety, no matter which side of the issue you're on. We need to find a balance that protects the rights of Americans, but at the same time protects public health. There have been a lot of children that have been lost either by not having them vaccinated because they were going through illnesses, but the parents that chose not to vaccinate their children have also lost them because of diseases. So we have to be really cognizant of where we stand on that and what we can do to make sure that we address it in our community. There is the increased use of vaping by teenagers with modified e-cigarettes that are actually being introduced out there without FDA approval, with powdered alcohol, powdered and odorless alcohol. There is drug-tainted honey oil. All of this that parents may not even be aware that the children are using. So as a community, we need to make sure that we address it through our health department and through our public health. So we need to find a way to educate our youth with science, with facts and data. And I believe the writing is on the wall that this is going to become even a greater epidemic, and we need to start addressing it now. What is the political dynamics of our state? The biggest thing is that we need economic development ethics, not only in the state, but in our counties. We need to rethink business. We need to rethink environment regulations. Do they commensurate with the benefits to the environment and to our workers? We need to ask ourselves that question locally and statewide. The entire cost appears to be falling on industry. Therefore, we're losing business. As I mentioned earlier, people are moving out to states that are not as highly regulated, but being successful in making sure that they address the environment as well. So it defeats the purposes of a lot of the regulations that we have. So we need to have a better sense of economics in order to be successful as a county, and I say amen to that. So anyway, very informational. We have a lot of changing issues. Last time I was at one of these meetings, it was the budget. This time, it was marijuana and water. Those were two, and economics, of course, three of the biggest issues. There was never a dull moment, and I will turn it over to our CEO, see if he wants to add anything to the annual meeting. He was there.
Yeah, I'll just highlight a couple of items. One was the drought and how well the state actually has done. There's still a lot more work that they need to do. Their concern is that it really hasn't had an economic hit yet, but if the drought continues 5, 6 years, 7 years down the road, then that could have an economic hit. So they want to prepare for that and disseminate some funds for that. The other one was with regards to social media. I think it's important the parents and the public know that when it comes to peer-to-peer based networking, LimeWire usage, torrents, those are the sites that should caution parents and should caution people. Shouldn't be using those sites. There's a lot of things that are not appropriate. But there's a lot of good things when it comes to using the web. And one of the things I think we do need to work on is the social media for the county to get the word out. I think it's an important tool that we can use. So I know that we have to get the right policy in place and do it correctly when we actually roll it out to the entire county. But those are the couple things that that stood out for me.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. And I'll just report out on the Board of Directors meeting. There was everything from marijuana, transportation, water, all the critical issues that all of us are facing. The same issues that the state is facing are the issues that the county is facing. the gas tax, all of that was discussed. They're addressing, as far as the drought, Congress is addressing issues on possible federal legislation that maybe can help counties and the state of California. There is the issue of secured funding for rural schools and no mandatory funding for PILT, and there's none in sight, evidently, but maybe somebody from the state can address that later. I know they're in the House. So, and then the other things that came about are the California forests. I talked about the watersheds. We do not get enough help from the feds to maintain our forests and do the right thing for the watersheds. So they're looking at serious risk of large, high-severity wildfires that we've already experienced here with the threat of lives. We have lost lives because of that. Water resources, the wildlife habitat, recreation, all of that is critical to the maintenance of our forests. And so that is an issue that the state of California is really talking in depth and trying to get support from the federal government to address it. There is an issue that Supervisor Botello brought before us a while back, and that was the grazing operations, and that the State Water Resources Control Board, the Water Board, had brought forward. That is now a dead proposal. They have decided to, has now proposed a resolution to discontinue the development of the program and will vote to adopt the resolution at its meeting in September. So they may have already done that. So thank you for bringing that to our attention. We don't have to worry about that one at this time. As far as the issues on marijuana, we do have an item on the agenda, so I will have some of that information at a later agenda item. So anyway, that was the information that I wanted to share with you in regards to our Board of Directors meeting, and I will now at this time see if anybody has any questions from the public. No? Okay. Any speaker cards? Okay, any questions or comments from the board? Supervisor Botello.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I want to thank you for taking the time to take that really tough trip up to South Lake Tahoe to attend this meeting in my behalf.
It was so hard, so tough. Yeah.
Yes, it looks like from your report it was nothing but work, and I truly appreciate the fine report that you came back with.
Well,
thank you.
Thank you. Okay. It was just a report. I don't believe we need to take action on anything. So we will move on to the last item before we actually, or do we have two? No, we have two. Item number 16, CAO?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, this item is coming out of our COG, Council of Governments. We have Mary Gilbert here to present to you. Your board had requested this item be brought to your board with regards to Highway 25, the widening project, and in particular, putting Highway 25 on the constraint list. So I've asked Mary to come here and give a presentation to your board and discuss this with you and the public. Mary?
Yes, good morning. Let me just get started here. Okay, apologize for that. Mary Gilbert, Executive Director of the Council of Governments. And today I'll be presenting to you on Highway 25 and a proposed San Benito County Regional Transportation Plan amendment. I would like to note that I have invited Maura Toomey, Executive Director of AMBAG. She's here as well, and I'll be asking her to speak a little bit about our regional coordination on the RTP amendment. So my presentation is brief, but here's an overview. I'll give some background on Highway 25 and kind of some of the background planning and where we are today. Also the same for the 2035 Regional Transportation Plan. We'll talk about financial constraint because that's really what has driven this conversation that we're having. I'll tell you about the progress that we've been making to date, go over the timeline and next steps, and then again our coordination with AMBAG. So background on Highway 25. I just want to start by saying that, acknowledging that the Highway 25 widening project is a priority in San Benito County, and that's been acknowledged at the Council of Governments level, at the Board of Supervisors level, at both City of Hollister and City of San Juan Bautista. All of those entities have adopted resolutions identifying Highway 25 as a priority project. We've included Highway 25 in planning and programming documents for at least the past 20 years, and that includes our regional transportation plans. We made significant safety improvements on Highway 25, and the Council of Governments allocated about $10.6 million of state highway funding to the safety improvements that are out on the highway today, making the roadways a lot safer for our commuters and other people traveling on the road, and that was our state highway bond funds that paid for that. So, you know, just again showing the commitment to the Highway 25 project, I think it is there, and no actions that have been taken to date have reduced that commitment to the project. In 2010, we had an environmental document that established project costs. And so I just want to go a little bit in the background of that. Caltrans is preparing an environmental document for the widening project. And we're looking at a route adoption, so for the full corridor of Highway 25 from San Felipe Road in Hollister to the San Benito, Santa Clara County line. That environmental document has been in development for a number of years, and we're currently finalizing that right now. And the costs that were established in there for phase one of the project, it's a $67 million cost. And I know you guys have heard these figures before. And that goes from San Felipe Road to Hudner Lane. And then phase two is a $181 million going from Hudner Lane to the county line. So it's a huge project cost. And that's for a large project, which is a new expressway alternative, a new alignment of the expressway off of the existing alignment of Highway 25. So we looked at that project cost, and I think, again, it did come before the Board of Supervisors and some updates that you received as well as at the COG board level, and that it far exceeds the highway funding that San Benito County anticipates to receive. So how would we fund such a project with that big of a cost? So that's kind of where some questions started coming up. In 2011, we adopted a new traffic impact mitigation fee program, and that's the fee that's charged to new residential, retail, and commercial developments. And those developments pay a fee which covers, helps to mitigate their impacts on transportation projects. So the fee program has about 15 projects in it. And in 2011, when it was adopted, the Highway 25 full-scale widening project, again, that $67 million phase one project, was not included in the funded list of impact fees, or for impact fee funding. Instead, it was replaced with a $4.7 million operations project on Highway 25, which was just passing lanes. So that reduced the amount of funding that would be coming toward a Highway 25 project just right there off the bat. We couldn't rely on any impact fees to fund Highway 25, the full 4-lane widening. And so that had impacts to the regional transportation plan listing that I'll get into as I go over the regional transportation plan. Our 2035 regional transportation plan was adopted in June 2014. That is adopted by the Council of Governments Board, and as the Regional Transportation Planning Agency, COG is responsible for developing and adopting the regional transportation plan. The RTP includes financial assumptions, and those, again, are also adopted by COG. And the COG board adopted financial assumptions early on in the planning process because the financials help us to develop the projects which will be included in the plan. The COG board directed that we would only be looking at core state, federal, and local funds for all the projects in the plan, whether they be highways, local streets and roads, transit, or bicycle and pedestrian projects. There was a clear action taken that we weren't going to be looking in the 2035 RTP at expanded funding, such as a sales tax, such as an increase in the traffic impact fees. So that limited what we could do with our project list, because our project list does have to be financially constrained. And again, the project list includes all modes of transportation throughout the county, including highways, local street and road investments, both maintenance and new infrastructure, bicycle and pedestrian projects, and transit. I want to reiterate, though, that Highway 25 is in the regional transportation plan. It's there in the unconstrained project list, financially unconstrained. And so it's never gone anywhere. It's in the RTP. It's identified as a priority and a need in San Benito County. So to go over again financial constraint in the RTP and what that means, we're required that we demonstrate financial and fiscal constraints, which means that not all projects that we include can be fully funded. We have statewide, there are limited funding resources for transportation, and there's little discretion among those funding resources. The RTP identifies 22 federal, state, and local sources, and out of those, 3 meet eligibility requirements that would allow us to use them for funding Highway 25. So again, Highway 25 then, because working with those 3 limited funding sources, we couldn't say that we had even $67 million for that first Highway 25 phase project. We had the operations funding for the operations project. It's in the traffic impact fee, and that's included in the unconstrained list. But Highway 25 was included in the fiscally unconstrained list. So still a priority project, but no, we can't say we can't definitively say that we have funding resources that would pay for phase 1 even of that project. So it's on our unconstrained list, but that doesn't mean that Highway 25 or any other project on the unconstrained list can't move forward, whether it be for additional funding or just additional planning associated with the project. So that's what we've been doing at COG, is continuing to move the Highway 25 project forward as a priority.
Madam Chair, if I could ask a question of Mary. Just to be real clear, we're trying to move forward with a transportation sales tax, and I think we were all in agreement that a portion of it, what portion I won't specify, or because we haven't got that far in discussions, would that qualify, whatever it is, say 10%, 15%, qualify as a funding source to move the project from unconstrained to constrained?
Yes.
Okay, I just want to make that clear about the importance of that COG sales tax, and why we, I know this board is very much behind it, why Hollister needs to understand how this is going to work. So I want to make that point.
Thank you. Okay.
And on that point, so, speaking of our progress to date to move the Highway 25 project forward, we are looking at those increasing funding resources so we can add on to what's in our regional transportation plan and increase the number of projects that can be on the constrained list to include Highway 25. One of the items is we are working on a traffic impact mitigation fee program update right now, where we are reevaluating Highway 25 and a cost associated with that. That could be included in the impact fee that would then be paid for by new development when they're paying for their fees for all their transportation impacts. And again, there's support in San Benito County for a transportation sales tax, some of which of that funding could go for Highway 25, as well as other projects like local street and road maintenance. And all of that will help us offset the need in the regional transportation plan so that we can reevaluate our revenue-constrained project list. In August 2015, the COG board has already approved these new financial assumptions for inclusion in the RTP as part of an amendment that would be coming before them. So we're working on other administrative processes in the meantime, but we do have that commitment from the COG board and that direction to move forward with new funding resources, something we didn't have when we were putting together that 2035 RTP. So we've got new direction, and that's allowing us to put together the RTP amendment. And then on the project side for Highway 25 specifically, we're looking at project scoping. I mentioned we're finalizing that environmental document. We're also looking at potential for project phasing versus just the 2 large phasing segments that we have right now. Are there smaller phases that would be an option for us? And then COG is funding an independent engineering alternatives analysis that we'll be putting together, where we're kind of reevaluating the scope of the project and downsizing the scope potentially, if it's feasible, from what's currently in the environmental document, which is the new 4-lane expressway alternative. So there may be some kind of midterm improvements that might still meet our need for congestion mitigation on the highway and reducing traffic and getting people, up to the Bay Area more quickly. And then also, COG is committed to public involvement, and we, in addition to our monthly board meetings, we also have a stakeholder group that's been meeting to discuss all transportation needs in San Benito County, but also will be helping us with the focus on Highway 25 as we go through the engineering alternatives. So in terms of our next steps and a timeline, we're working on completing that new traffic impact mitigation fee study and bringing something before the COG board in November. We're working on the Highway 25 project scoping and also developing a new expenditure plan or the expenditure plan for the sales tax. So that'll be ongoing. It's really happening kind of now, but December through April will be when we're really looking hard at that, and that'll be when we're looking at some of those numbers as far as what portion of a sales tax would go to Highway 25 versus other projects. And then the administrative process will be ongoing between winter and summer of 2016, where we're coordinating with AMBAG, and I'll let Maura talk some more about that. We will be required to do some environmental review. There's an environmental impact report associated with the regional transportation plan, so any amendment to the RTP requires new environmental analysis. There will be some opportunities for public hearings as required by statute. And, this process that we're following, this administrative process, is very critical because we do want to make sure we will have state and federal approval of the RTP amendment. And so we plan that the final RTP amendment would be adopted this summer of 2016. So I'd like to have Maura just kind of go back over some of the requirements for the administrative process and the coordination with AMBAG, and then I'll be available for any questions that you have.
Okay, thank you, Mary. Do we have questions before Mary?
No.
Before Maura comes up, Maura, thank you. Mary, thank you, and Maura, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today. And
You're very welcome. I'm Maura Toomey, Executive Director of the Association of Monterey Bay Area Governments. And as Mary has explained, the COG is currently going through the process to amend the Regional Transportation Plan for San Benito County. And the critical piece for Highway 25 is to identify financial resources so that it can be placed on the financially constrained list. Once the COG adopts an action and places the project, identifies the funding, amends their financial plan, and places Highway 25 on the financially constrained list, they can submit that to AMBAG and request that we amend the Metropolitan Transportation Plan, which is the plan for the three-county region, to reflect Highway 25 now being a financially constrained project. We expect that the COG will take action, and we will have that request sometime next spring, probably in March or April. And once we receive that request, then we will initiate the process to amend the MTP. And that process includes, as Mary mentioned, both processes include environmental review, and which means that as part of the plan, we had to do an EIR for the plan that was adopted in 2014. When we move a project from the financially unconstrained list to the constrained list, it can potentially have an environmental impact, which we must assess. We must also, submit that for public comment and public review, and there will be a period for public comment and public review both on the environmental review and on the MTP amendment as well. There will be public hearings. And at the end of that process, the AMBAG board will take an action to amend the MTP to move the Highway 25 project from financially unconstrained list in the MTP to the financially constrained list. And we expect, given the time it takes to do the environmental review and the public comment periods, we expect to do that in late summer of 2016. So our board would probably act by September of 2016. And I'll be happy to answer any questions.
okay, are there any questions of Maura at this time? Supervisor Munzer?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mara, I just want to thank you for coming today.
Sure.
And I just want to make sure this board's aware that either Heather, who's sitting in the back, or Mara is always at the COG meeting. They're always available to answer any questions. And I think the critical thing to understand is think it's the next to last point, Mary touched on it, is the process that we are going through is critical for the state and federal approval, that we're amending our RTP and then AMBAG will be amending the MTP, and that we'll have buy-off from Caltrans, and they are also at our COG meeting, and they are giving us the nod that we are going through the steps correctly so that they will be able to buy off on this once the process is done. I know it takes a while. People think, well, why can't you just put it back on? But there is a process that has to be taken both by the San Benito COG board and by the AMBAG board to place 25 back on the constrained list. And even though that's going to take a little while, the COG board is doing what it needs to do to keep Highway 25 going forward as a project, as Mary alluded to. So I just want to reiterate that the COG board is committed to this process, and AMBAG staff, I don't think AMBAG board per se know about this yet, but AMBAG staff is committed to assisting us to get this done.
Yeah, and I'd like to make a couple of comments to that effect. Supervisor Munzer mentions the state and federal review and process. I think it's important to understand that both your regional transportation plan and the metropolitan transportation plan, we think of plans as something sort of innocuous, but really the plan is the basis for federal transportation and state transportation funding in the region. So having those projects within the plan, whether they're on the unconstrained or the constrained list, opens up the potential for state and federal funding. And as Mary noted, the difference between financially constrained and unconstrained has to do with the ability to identify adequate, reasonable funding for a project when it's placed in the plan. So projects in the plan are eligible for funding, but there isn't always funding identified for them. In terms of the AMBAG board, the issue of Highway 25 has been discussed at the AMBAG board, and I would say most of our directors who were on the board at the time of the June adoption of our MTP are aware of the issues surrounding Highway 25 and are very cognizant of the work that the COG is doing to move that forward, to move it to the constrained list, and they will be happy to act on it when it comes before the board.
Thank you, Mara. And I want to thank Supervisor Munzer. He put a meeting together where I got together with Mary, Supervisor Munzer, and Mara, and it gave me a better understanding because I was of the mind that, hey, we gave you direction to put it in the constraint list, do it. I didn't realize that, number one, we should have never taken it off because when you take it off, you create a whole different set of problems. We didn't know what we were getting ourselves into when we did. We were doing it for, I think at the time we were going through the recession. We thought this was the best thing to do, but in retrospect, we would have done it different, I'm sure. But now we've got the challenge of putting it back on, making sure that we assess the environmental impacts that it's going to have, so that we do get, when we're ready, we're on the top of the list for the funding. So I thank you for that, and thank you, Supervisor Munzer. I have a better understanding, and I think we're going to move forward with this as quickly as we can with the process that you're taking. So, okay. Any comments or questions from the public regarding this item?
Madam Chair, we have Mr. Richmond who submitted an item.
Oh, okay, very good. Thank you. Marty?
Marty Richard from Holliston, thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank the chair sincerely from the bottom of my heart for saying the words. I was wondering if anybody was going to say it. We should have never taken it off. I thought we were going to listen to this whole bunch of walk-back gobbledygook, is what I call it, trying to cover up that we made a really terrible error, and no one was going to say, oh, we really made an error. So I want to thank you for your honesty, because we made a terrible error. And when we took it off, and you were told not to take it off, you went to extraordinary lengths to take it off. You threw Mr. Delacruz off the board so you could keep it off. When they voted to put it back on, I stood here and listened to you get Mr. Dela Cruz off the board. You can shake your head no if you want to. It would be a lie to say no. You threw him off because you didn't like his vote on Highway 25 to keep it on, to try and get it back on. That's true. You made a terrible mistake, and you did it for political reasons. And when the political house fell in, now all of a sudden we've got everybody tromping up here saying, oh, we got to have a way to pay for it. All over the state of California, there are stuff on the constraint list with no way to pay for it. And that's the way people keep those projects alive. And if you don't believe it, call up the district in Caltrans and ask them for the truth. And the truth is, as long as they're on the constraint list, the project's alive. You take it off the constraint list, the project's dead as a doornail, because they won't have any money to work on it, and they put it at the bottom of the pile, and they got a pile that never ends. Okay? So you made a terrible error, and that's going to cost us millions of dollars in the long run, and years and years and years. And you shouldn't have done it. I make mistakes all the time. The difference is I don't get 50 people coming up here to the podium and say it really doesn't make a difference or whatever, or the project's still alive, whatever. It's not true. It may get alive again if we put it back on, but we've lost a lot of money and we lost a lot of time, and we did it for political reasons, and it was a stupid mistake, and I appreciate at least the chairman saying we should have never taken it off. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Marty. Any other speaker cards? Oh, Mr. Jones?
Marvin Jones, Hollister. I have no problems with it being on or off. Good to see that you're trying again. Mistakes are past. Let's move forward from here. When the project was discussed back when it was on the list, we had presentations from Caltrans of the option A, option B, going out through the farmland, going up to the county line and necking down to 2 lanes. And I understand that Mary said that we'll do that again. It'll only go to the county line. It won't make it to 101. Okay. There was an observation back then that if we do all of the paving, do not do an overfly at Route 156 intersection, because they'd take all the money. You could do one or the other. You could not have an flyover at Route 156, Route 25, and have any money left to pave. So Caltrans' position was, let's pave the farmland, let's cover up these row crops. We'll have the stoplight at 156, and we'll have an 11-mile drag strip to where it necks down at the county line. A suggestion was made, why don't you do the flyover and don't pave over all the row crops, don't pave over the grazing land. You would at least have one choke point removed. The flyover at 156, you'd still have the choke point where it goes back to 2-lane. It wouldn't go far past 156 before they run out of money. That would actually made a little bit more sense as far as safety, no rear ends at the stoplight, transportation, don't have to stop for the stoplights, and you still have the choke point when it necks back down to 2 lanes. It didn't get much traction then. It's interesting to see which way it will go now. Probably Caltrans wants to lay asphalt, cover up the row crops, cover up a grazing land, and still have our choke point and our 11-mile drag strip. Just interesting. Here's an option. Be interesting to see how much consideration it gets. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Any other speaker cards? Anyone else from the public that would like to address the board on this item? Okay, I'll bring it back. It was a presentation only. I don't believe there's any action that needs to be taken. Mary and Mara, again, thank you. And I would recommend that if there's any way you can reach out to the city to make the same presentation to them, it would be very worthwhile. Better understanding is always helpful for all of us. So, thank you. Okay, now what we'll do, we haven't taken a break, so I would like for our council to introduce the closed session items. We'll take a break, do our closed session, and then come back for the last item, number 18. Oh, no, 17 was removed.
Oh, it was moved?
Yeah, 17 was removed from the get-go. Yeah. Okay, council?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Board of Supervisors will now adjourn into closed session to discuss agenda items number 19 and 20 on today's agenda. Item number 19 is a closed session to confer with the county's labor negotiators. Those agency designated representatives are Allison Hauk, Danya Torres Wong, Ray Espinoza, Joe Paul Gonzalez, Belinda Casillas, Georgia Cochran, and Steve Coffey. The employee organizations involved are institutions associations, law enforcement management, management employees group, SEIU Local 529, the general unit employees, SEIU Local 2015, Deputy Sheriff's Association, confidential employees, confidential management employees, department heads, and unrepresented employees. The authority to meet can be found in California Government Code Section 54957.6. Agenda item number 20 is to meet and confer with legal counsel regarding anticipated litigation and the initiation of litigation pursuant to subdivision D4 of Section 54956.9 in one case.
Anybody from the public would like to ask questions or comments regarding these two closed session items? If not, we'll adjourn to closed session and come back and report out before we start with item number 18. Thank you.